Hey everybody, today I've got Lauren Baptiste with me. She's a consultant that focuses as a burnout coach. So welcome, Lauren.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So can you give a little bit of a background of kind of how you came about to become a burnout coach?
Absolutely. Well, it started with a pretty rough burnout. I ended up in 2013 in the emergency room, and that was the start of understanding what burnout really was. And this was before it was considered a workplace phenomenon by the World Health Organization. So for me, I was doing the consulting life. I was working long weeks, flying Monday mornings, getting back Friday nights, doing my laundry, going to sleep, and then coming back to the another week of travel. And while like part of me was so mentally prepared, like game on, let's do this. My body just after months of doing it and after smoke before the fire, I'll say, before I even got into it, my body was like, no more. So that was the turning point for me of why I started to get into this work.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting because I know when I started in consulting, I started in 1998 and I loved it. But I remember one of the first projects I was on, well, like by myself, and but it's still early in my career, and it was interesting because I talked to numerous people who, like later, like I would always say, like the first or second project, they would usually come home, and this happened to me where, like I sat on my couch, I was like sleeping all day because it was like I was just completely exhausted, and I just sat like, and I just asked myself, can I keep doing this? And I know some people who who went through that and just said I can't, and they went left consulting altogether. And I think the folks who do, like myself, we go, yeah, we kind of mentally say, okay, we can go through it. But then we really end up repeating the same pattern of just, hard travel, hard hours, probably not a lot of healthy living, or at least maybe trying, but really having it affect us, for years.
And I think the thing that I found the hardest was that I wasn't really taught how to do it well. It was just like, buy your ticket. We'll see you on Monday. Let's go. There was no real encouragement of like, how do you do this sustainably? Us in the consulting profession, like we do it for decades. Some of us make our full career out of it. And if we're traveling or running back and forth, it's so easy to stick with takeout, not sleep enough, just kind of live day by day. And that's when it becomes so unsustainable.
Mhm. Yes. Can you define what burnout is? I think everybody kind of knows what it is when they feel it, but can you define what it is so we kind of have a framework around?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the World Health Organization breaks it into three main symptoms. So, exhaustion, which can be physical and mental, cynicism or detachment, and then the third being an ineffectiveness at work. So, I think of it more like productivity. Maybe it used to take you a half a day to do something, now it's taking you a full day, or you're just like not doing it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I think you and I talked a few weeks ago, and one thing I found with myself, and I just real actually noticed this, is that I would go through a period where, uh, like I could go for like a year or like really quite a long length of time and really be what I think of as really productive. And then like I'm ashamed to say this because it always kind of slaps me in the face, but as I'm there, it's sort of like as I'm kind of not at the peak, but kind of leading up, I'm going, hey, burnout isn't real. Look how productive I am. Like I've been doing this for months and like I'm like just like, a superstar performer. And then sure enough, at some point in the coming weeks, maybe it is like months, it hits me, right? And like I'm exhausted and all those signs, right? And I'm now starting, I'm in my 50s and I'm starting to now see the signs, not, that are kind of leading up to it. But I found like how many times in my life I kind of go through that and sort of kid myself and sort of like now I realize when that thought comes in your head, like, hey, you're a superstar, you can kind of keep running like this. It's probably an indication that it's my body is telling me or my brain's telling me time to slow down, buddy. Like, you can't keep going even though you think you're all that, So
As you're sharing it, I like hear this like I'm invincible
yeah,
complex of like,
yes.
I'm fine. What's one more week? What's one more project? Let me just get to that next milestone. And that continues to keep us in this like vicious like visual of like skating on what do they say? Like on a razor's edge of like teetering between actually burning out and maybe just being stressed or burning out or something much worse.
Yes. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that because I think we're also getting feedback from other people because when other people are saying, "Hey, I'm burned out," or I quit my job, or I made this big lifestyle change, and we're kind of in that, like you said, like I'm invincible. It's usually like often those, I think, you know, we're those messages are coming to us for a reason, right? Either like even our own subconscious is trying to pick that up to go, hey, I think we need to slow it down before you get sick or tired or and I think probably the people that we're close to will probably say, no, I mean, you were burning the candle at both ends, long before you realize that like our
They
family members
know.
are yes.
They know.
Yeah.
Because you're a little snippier when you come home, you withdraw, we show up a little different, but we don't notice it until it's something like, oof, I'm sick. Or, oh, like I have such brain fog, right? We start to feel usually a physical symptom in our body. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I know one of the challenges like for most consultants is that like a lot of people who are good at their job, and we'll use consulting as an example, uh, is that they often enjoy serving others, right? They enjoy the problem solving. They like being the sort of the go-to person and the person who has the answers, and so that makes us good at what we do and makes us in demand. Makes us in demand, even though sometimes, um, it's very stressful and very, um, causes a lot of stress. But what makes us good at what we do is often the thing that uh, causes the is keeps us going, right, and actually fools us into doing that. So what are some suggestions on how to kind of monitor that or kind of deal with that sort of, hey, I want to serve, I want to be there for my clients, or I want to be there for my family, and I just feel overwhelmed, but what are some suggestions on how to deal with that?
So what I hear a lot when you're asking this question is this idea of like death by a thousand cuts. In the consulting industry, how many times do we people please and say yes to things that maybe we should have said no to? Oh, can I have this done by tomorrow? Sure, the first time, but then the second time was like, oh, but I would have loved to eat dinner with my family, or I would have really liked to work out, or right. We start to sacrifice ourselves, and that's how we get there because we want to please our clients. We want to please the teams we work with. We want to please, right, everybody because we think in our head, this creates future work. I want to create good results right now. I got to put food on my plate for my family. So people pleasing becomes the armor that we wear that like we think protects us, but it's actually weighing us down from really having this symbiotic relationship where we serve our clients and we serve ourselves.
Yeah, I like that because I mean, again, like, jeepers, I've been on this planet for over 5 decades, and I'm just learning to say that, right, and just realize that because what I'm finding is for me, I dislike saying no because I really wanted people to like me, and then the only time I would really push back is when I was so sort of in a mental space that I couldn't care less, right? So it was like, okay, I'm just going to push back now. I'm going to tell them what I think. I'm going to tell them no because it doesn't matter to me, right? Like if they just boot me off the project, it's better than staying here anyways. And so what do I have to lose? And I find, I'm finding is that I have to be more proactive and more like preemptive around what I'm doing because saying no isn't bad, right? We have to, we have to be able to it's our life, and so being able to manage that work, and I find also when we do say no, usually they move on. Like saying no without some condition around, no, but if we just say no, I can't accommodate that and leave it. Usually people just move on, they find somebody else to do it, or they rearrange it. So it's usually not as bad as we think. So
We overpromise and underdeliver, which is what can be really toxic. So there are ways that we can say no that don't actually sacrifice our well-being too. And I love the way you said it so like nicely is to say no clearly. There are so many things when we think about how do we like decline either an opportunity, a birthday party, like whether it's a personal or a professional thing, but we need to say no. We need to be clear when we say it. And we have to remember that today's no is not tomorrow's, like it's not a forever no. It's a temporary no.
Yeah.
And if we do it the right way, compassionately and directly, there's a respect there that comes from it. But we just need to practice that because what we usually feel is guilt instead. So we give a maybe and then we overpromise, we underdeliver, we burn out. And that's where we get into that vicious cycle.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was finding that you know, like the lame excuses, right? So it's like, no, I can't make that, I can't do that because, and then we give a reason, and then the person overcomes that. They find that reason we're giving to be an objection. They overcome that objection. Then now I have to say no a different way. And it's just this crazy cycle without just saying, no, I can't do that. Right. Or, that's just not going to work. Okay. So, yeah.
I love that. I was talking to somebody not yesterday, last week, and she says to me, as we were talking about this topic as well, and she goes, remember, no is a complete sentence. Like it's good to know in our head why we're saying no. I want to wash my hair, right? Or whatever we decide to say or give the excuse. We don't have to give an excuse, but we need to know why it's a no for us. So, for example, it's like if I go back to the example of I want to have dinner with my family, I don't have to necessarily say why I'm declining. And the crisper we are in that delivery of the no, the better. So you just say, I'm not going to be able to make it. Thank you for thinking of me for this opportunity. Or I'm not, and then that's it. It's a full sentence.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I like that. Yeah. Well, and, somebody had told me early in my career, which they said, one of the big things is like making sure that your home life is like in order, and which I know is sometimes difficult for people.
Yeah,
it's actually difficult for a lot of people, but
yes.
but to try to get your home life in order, and it was somebody long before I ever got married, long before I was ever in a significant serious relationship, and they said you can't escape your home by going to work, and because if you're escaping home by going to work, where do you escape work? Now you have to find some other outlet, which is probably something that's really counterproductive. It's the bar, you spending too much time at the
I
gym,
just
whatever,
went
right?
in my head, bar,
Yeah,
strip club, like
exactly.
where I don't know where else we're going, but like
Yeah,
probably
yes,
not a library because they're closed
no,
after hours.
that's right. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's
Unhealthy. Yeah.
unhealthy places. That's right, because we have to get that met. And so, I think we, like, I think often we blame the problems at home on work, and we'll say, work is too demanding. But one thing I've found for myself was that, and even with work, when work becomes almost unmanageable, is like when I try to take time off, I realize, okay, there's other things I have to do, but I'm going, but my work and my career is something I can control. As much as I go, well, it's uncontrollable because the client is just like pinging me, or they're dumping work on me, but I can do it. I'm good at what I do, and it's something that I know how long it's going to take. I know what I'm doing, but these unknowns where it's okay, I have to do these other things. Well, now I'm dealing in areas that I'm not as familiar, and I want to avoid it. And so when really I have to deal with the other things in my life, because work can't be the escape. Work has to be the place where maybe I self-actualize and live up my purpose, and I make money and I pay my bills, but it can't be the place where I escape to just because there's other things that I have to work on.
Yeah, so valuable. It's like, how do we frame, and how many of us think of, there's this term like the third place, or we have three places, and we talk about our home, our work, and like back in the day, we used to have a third place. Like I think about my grandparents who used to play like cards every night with their friends, or a lot of people now maybe will go take a gym class or, go to yoga or something like that. And so for a lot of us, it's like, there's this idea of like, well, now we work at home. So that can be tough.
Yes.
And or we're traveling because we're doing like that consulting life and then we're never home, but then there's never a third place to feel grounded. It can be a tough, it's not the easiest life to be in consulting. And we have to be extra aware of that ever changingness that can be ungrounding, that can lead towards that burnout.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. And Starbucks shouldn't be the third place. Although it seems like it. So, yeah. Um, what other suggestions do you have with people to try to kind of manage that? Like we always use that work-life balance, and like sometimes it's very successful people will say there is no balance. You just have to kind of manage it. There is no sort of okay, I'll there's 60% here and 40% here or something. It's an ongoing process. But what are some of your suggestions to try to manage that? Because I think clearly the percentages of you know challenged relationships and challenged home life is not falling. In fact, I think it's probably even far worse after COVID. But what are some
Mhm.
suggestions that you have that people can maybe put into place to kind of help some of that?
Yeah, there's a lot of places we can go here. I mean, the one thing is, I'm sure there are going to be people listening to this being like, you're right, work-life balance isn't real. And then you have another group that says, like, okay, maybe it is possible. I've heard terms like work-life synergy. I'm like, I don't know. Like, and this is my expertise, right? But I would say, like, I think about work-life balance like a pendulum. It's going to swing all the time. Now, it'd be nice if the swings like weren't, so skewed to the work, but a lot of times it does. So we have to be mindful that there has to be a swing. There can be a busy season. There can be a period of time where you're working maybe more than you would like, or nights or weekends. But are you swinging to the other side where you're taking your vacation and actually disconnecting? Again, hard in our life because we're always trying to like build our business, trying to continue to be there for our clients, but we do need to find those swings back and forth. So that's like I think, like macro idea of like, how are you making sure there's an actual swing between the two? But then I like to think about, well, what's the everyday, which I hope has like smaller swings back and forth where you can create routine. It's interesting that you mentioned like 60/40 or however that is. I don't know how realistic even that might be in everyday life. If we're working 8 to 10 hours a day, and we're awake for another six or so, like uh, those 6 hours are for grooming, driving, all the other things. But we have to make sure that there is in every week a portion of time that's doing something that fills you up.
Mm.
And in every day, a few minutes at least to something that also fills you up, nourishes you, grounds you, moves your body, right? Something. But we can't just wait for the vacation, and we can't fully ignore it when we're in our busy period either. So when I think of work-life balance, it's truly like finding that harmony between the two, which I believe is absolutely possible, just knowing that it's not going to be the same every day for the rest of your life, especially in our world of how we do it in consulting.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I like that, and I think you're 100% right because if I look at we look at the hours we spend, and then we go, okay, what are the work that what extra work we still have to cook and eat, and like you said, clean ourselves and do all of the things that are just normal maintenance type of activities that take time. Um, how do we actually manage that, and then how do we fit it all in? Because I think one of the challenges that I'm always interested in, and I was always curious about, or more of an observation was that for like thousands of years, like a huge percentage of the population, like this goes up to like 1910, like 60, 70, 80% of our population were rural, right? We
Mm-hmm.
worked on farms. And now it's like completely the opposite, right? It's like 80% are urban or like suburban type of living. So, and we went from really like being outside, kind of having a very methodical type of life to being, when that whole urbanization process happened, really going and working factories. And okay, factory started at 8, you worked till 5, you stopped, and there was some sort of structure to, you had to be somewhere, versus, yeah, you milk the cows had to be milked at a certain time, or whatever, but it was a more of a methodical approach in farming. And I find that for human beings, we've been on the planet for 100,000 years, 50,000 years. It doesn't really matter. It's a long time. But we were really, for the most part, really rural lifestyles, not urban, where now we are focused on the clock. And um, so I think it's interesting, because I think what you were describing really was more like even trying to kind of be, understand what our responsibilities are, but then how do we actually build in that, so that we're not just working or looking at the clock going, okay, now I've got to, now we got to, it's date night right now, right? We got an hour and a half to spend with whoever your significant other is. That's it. Okay, an hour and a half's gone. Let's go home. And like, it isn't just completely structured, right? So yeah, it's trying to build it in more with a more fluid approach.
What I really appreciate that you were sharing as well is this idea, like the structure is gone, right? We learned in COVID too that like any last remnants of structure was pretty much blown out the window. And in some people, like in situations, it was a blessing. Like maybe they were commuting 2 hours a day and now they got 4 hours of their life back every day, right? There are some instances where it worked, but then you have the laptop sitting in the computer, sitting in the kitchen as you're making dinner, right? And then you hear a notification come up as maybe you're bathing your kids at the end of the day. And this is where it gets muddy because we can work from everywhere, we can live from everywhere. But one of the things I heard that you shared just now was how little time we give ourselves to digest these complex things. Mm-hmm. Think about if you were a farmer, if you are a farmer, there's time to think, there's time to be present, there's time. Even though you're working, doesn't mean you're not diligently working. But when we are working, we're in emails, back-to-back calls, every moment scripted, which creates a time management problem, which creates burnout on its own, because for the most part, we don't accurately manage our time. We're always kicking things off or saying things will be faster than they actually take. But then at the end of the day, people tell me they can't go to sleep because their brains are buzzing because they never had a moment to breathe in and digest the day. Yeah. It's like eating dinner and going for a run right after. Probably not the best for most of us.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, then that's a great point, because one thing I remember when I first started in consulting, you'd have a meeting, everybody would leave, usually with notebooks, not with laptops, but you'd leave the meeting with notebooks. You'd go to the elevator and you'd have a conversation, or you'd clue out, even for those couple of minutes, to go to the next meeting. Now everybody, as soon as the meeting's over, they're looking at their phones, they're standing at the elevator, they're walking, even if they're on site. If they're off site, it's the same thing. Often people who are in meetings, they're on a Teams meeting, a Zoom meeting, whatever it is, they're on their phone, they're doing other things, and we can't multitask, but it's even beyond multitasking, because our brain is just going, like, I'm not even giving myself a chance to even my brain to breathe, and it's just, okay, now the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When they talk about inside of the body, what happens, they say like one stressful email can be enough to throw off the hormones for 22 hours after that one email. Yeah. Now, how many emails do we all get a day? A lot.
Yeah.
And then how many meetings? So we can see why our bodies are freaking out in some ways, whether it's, we could talk about that exhaustion. Like I hear this all the time where like people are tired all day, and then when they can finally go to sleep, they're awake all night. And it just perpetuates that. Like, of course, because like once you lay down and you're like, okay, time to like quiet the world, your brain's like starting to just like feel what's going on, it's trying to realize like what happened today.
Yes, that's right. Yes. Well, and it's interesting because, I mean, I'm not a expert on children, but that's one of the things they talk about. Like even small children who cry at night, often they're just processing all of the stimulus for the day, right? And so the crying is really a way for them to just say, like, process through, right, everything. Now, that's just what I've heard, but I think for a lot of human beings, we probably feel like crying, which is also another set of problems if that's actually happening. But you know, because I think there is that level of burnout where the ones that we all know about, where we go, yeah, I'm tired and I'm, uh, you know, snapping at, again, the person at Starbucks, or I'm yelling at the person in the car ahead of me, which isn't healthy. But then there's the more extreme where people are really thinking like hurtful thoughts that they can hurt themselves or hurt others, which
Mhm.
can happen with extreme burnout, where they just don't have a chance to ever sort of stop.
Yeah, there are stories where there were two stories in the past month that I've heard of where it's been taken to that beyond burnout place where they're committing suicide because of work. And I think, a lot of the work I do is like on the softer side of burnout. It's helping people through, it's giving them tools, it's like staying bubbly through it because it's a heavy topic. But we also have to remember the urgency of this. And this isn't just a nice to have, and it's not just so that you could be more productive at work. It's because your life is worth living. And this is your life to be enjoyed. And I
Yes.
think, even you and I had a conversation where it's like, how do we balance like, oh, just have a fun life, just have fun, but like also do something meaningful. And I think there's a balance there that we need to like we might not love our jobs perfectly, but like we can find fun in every day or in something that we do. And if we're not finding any fun, then we really need to take a moment and sit back and figure out, well, then do I need to change so that I can start having fun and continue to do my purpose work and drive my mission forward.
Yes. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, because it's, one of the big things is, I mean, most people who are listening to this, or even people who are in consulting, are typically higher performers, meaning like
Mm-hmm.
they want to achieve a lot, and this isn't a career where somebody just kind of dabbles in it and they just go, oh, I'll see how I like it. They usually don't last very long. So it's usually people who they have high expectations for themselves and they want to achieve a lot. Um, but there's the other side which goes, look, we can't take it all on, and then we also identifying like whose task is it. We can't take on every task for every person around us. Like there is, this is even beyond responsibility. It really comes down to, like, first of all, we're responsible and accountable to ourselves to make sure that we live out our lives. And then there's the other part which goes, how do we actually sort of really empower the people around us to say, look, you're responsible for yourself. And, I don't have to take on all of my kids' responsibilities. They have to live with their own consequences for their own decisions. And but where's that sort of balancing, that balance between saying, as a parent, I have to step in, but at other times where no, they've got to sit in it themselves because it's theirs. And we don't have to fix every problem that comes along. And but I think that you know with people who have high expectations of themselves, it's sometimes difficult because we think we should fix everything that comes by, or we see a problem and we want to fix it, right? So
I hear this all the time. It's like assuming because we have these problem solving brains, we feel like every solution I should be able to figure out. And I love it's like a Marie Forleo book called like Everything is Figure Outable. And I think that's true to some extent. But I think we also need to acknowledge when we're not the expert. Like we are all as like consultants or someone listening to this podcast, or even, you know, a teenager who's listening to this podcast. Like it doesn't matter, but we all have an expertise in who we are and what we do. And I also know I'm not a doctor. I also know I'm not a firefighter. I also know I'm not best equipped to like paint the Mona Lisa duplicate. Like I need to be mindful of the things that I'm really good at and then also be really aware of the ones I'm not. And especially when it becomes our mental health, I think we try to kind of put it like brush it under the rug, suppress it, it'll get better, blame the circumstances. But with mental health, we need to be extra careful because it infiltrates everything. Like how we're doing one thing at work for sure is showing up how we are at home with our loved ones. And that's where we need to be really mindful and say, okay, I tried a couple things, it's not working. Maybe I actually do need to raise my hand and get a little more support.
yes, yeah, yeah, I like that. And it's interesting because I tell myself this, if I'm the smartest person in the room, it still doesn't mean I actually have the answer, right?
I love that. So good.
Especially in areas that I'm not familiar with, right? And just because I can come up with an answer doesn't mean it's right. And so you're better off to leave it be, or find someone else. And some of that is just kind of moving through that and saying, okay, like we're gonna have to find someone to answer that. I don't have to have the answer for everything. And I think you're right. It's really understanding what things we should be involved with and what things we shouldn't. And we don't have to be, I think one of the things I think with consultants, we kind of love the Superman or Superwoman
Oh
syndrome,
yeah.
where we like to be the ones to solve the problem, and it makes us
Love
feel
to
good.
say.
Yeah,
This is actually an amazing thing. We want to be the hero.
yeah, yeah.
But what do they say? Like heroes eat last? I think there's a book called that, or there's this idea. There is a thing called the triangle of disempowerment.
Mm,
So in the triangle, we have the hero. At the corners of the triangle, we have the hero, we have the witness, and we have the victim.
mm,
So if you think of being the Superman, Superwoman consultant, we're trying to be the hero and save our client who's the victim.
mm.
And the witness maybe is everyone who just gets to see you do your victim, your hero thing.
Yeah.
But what happens is all of those roles are actually disempowered.
Mm,
If we continue to live in that Superman, Superwoman context, then we always feel like in order to be successful, we always have to be saving. And then the client's always going to be needing.
yeah.
And so what we want to do as the hero is, or call us the hero, the leader, the one who knows, is instead of just like serving them the answer, teach them how to fish, teach them how to like pull the answer in the future, and then we can go help somebody else. But it stays disempowering sometimes when we're like, if it's not me, you're out of luck.
Yes, that's right. Yes, yeah. I like the way you worded that. We put that up because even understanding that, and the one thing with being a hero is we need a victim, right? We need someone to save. And so with that, we're actually going to be searching for we're going to be searching for car crashes, right? Like
Mm.
where can I go? And which means we're really operating in a chaotic sort of environment, looking for the bigger problems, right? And the bigger fires that we need to go put out. And then as we sort of reach our threshold, we either are blaming other people, or we really don't advance and grow. So I like the way you put that, because that's always that balancing act between feeding our ego, or whatever's driving us to be a hero. Because I know, and I'll admit, I like it. I like to be the guy with the answer. I like to be the one they have to
Yeah.
go to. It gives me, makes me feel powerful. So
There's a place I think to do it where you can be like the thought leader and also be like, okay, well, I'm still going on vacation, but my colleague's going to step in and help here. Or, like there's an empowered way where you don't feel like if it's not me all the time, then they're not going to be saved. So I love that idea of like, if you're searching for the victim, instead we can be empowered and say, I'm going to help you. And I've been doing this for a long time and I have a lot of answers. And I'm here to help you improve your company, your business, your situation. And that's where I think it can be a nice balance of all of it. And to me, that's what the win-win feels like, where everybody's like empowered.
yes, yeah, I like that. Well, and it's interesting, because I was listening to, I forget what book it was, but they talked about whose task is it, and I think it's they've been talking about who's like, and really getting down to um who deals with the consequence of this task not being done. And I think as consultants, were hired, like the client hires us to go and solve their problem. And again, I think the ones who are good, like I know for me, I would take on the client's problem like it was my own,
Mm.
which was great. But I remember, I would be in client, I'd be yelling at people, right? Because I would really feel like it was my problem, or I would take on the stress, or I would, and I would be the one trying to solve it, because I actually literally took on the persona of the client. I was the one that this was my problem. And what I had to realize was that I have to take on the problem like it's my own, because I have to see it, but I have to be objective, right? I have
Mm.
to still step away from it, and not and realize it's not mine. And I think when we get into this sort of loop of it being, and I think when we start to get burned out, we sometimes lose that, right? Because we're going, this has got to be done. They can't do this. And it's like, hold on, they can't do that, right? It's not us. And yes, we're
Mm.
hired to do it, but let's take a step back and make sure we have a little bit of a barrier between us that make sure that we're giving objective solutions, but we
That was the
can't.
word in my head as you were sharing. I was like, objectivity, like for sure. And then also remind, like, how many of us are hired because they want an outside party to do the work? And if we
Yes.
like embed ourselves as the one that has to do that and train the people or do it, like, almost like embed themselves as if you're the employee, that's not the role why they brought you in. They likely love the fact that you bring a fresh perspective and come in. And I think sometimes if we get too caught up in the burnout of it, we do lose some of that objectivity in the
Yeah.
process.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. And yeah, I had to learn that through, a number of situations where it was like, okay, and you gotta separate, the skill of seeing their problem and feeling it is great. You've got to now be objective and separate yourself. And which, you know, made the relationships a lot better, especially with the client. And, because we aren't their, we're not their employee. And and it's funny because usually, even if you look at the management sometimes of a company, like they're not like again running around with their hair on fire. They're in a calm manner because they're realizing, look, these are problems that have to be solved. We got to work through it, and it just takes time, and we don't have to, yeah, kind of lose our minds because there's an outstanding problem. So
And they're not finding themselves as the one that has to solve it. Like this is
mm,
a team effort. It's going to take time. And they could be running around the hallway screaming, work faster, do it better. Or like, but
yes,
they're still not in the weeds. Like one person can't actually save everyone and everything.
yes, yes. Well, and thank you for bringing up that point because I think that's actually a big part of us realizing we are just one member of a team. And yeah, we might be a significant member. We might kind of think we're a significant member because we have high thoughts of ourselves, which is good. but
Good.
but we are still just one member of that. And
Yeah.
even if we're a solo being brought in to solve one problem, we're still just a member of the team. Like the client is, even if we're working with like there's one client and us, it's a two-member team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're just one member of that team. It's not, we're not the team. And I think it's that's an important distinction because when we could separate and go, hey, I've got to I wrote a book called The Trust Paradigm, and one of the big things I talked about is being authentic. And I said, one of the big things is we have to a lot of people say, well, I want to be authentic, meaning I just want to be myself, but we have to be authentic to the role we're playing. And so what role are we playing, right? And understand what that expectation is. But once we leave that role, right, now how do I have to be authentic, right? Do I, as a parent or a spouse or a partner or, adult child or whatever role we're playing, what's authentic in that role and understand what does that mean? How does it serve me? And because I always use the example of a UFC fighter. We don't expect a UFC fighter to play that. In fact, they'd be in prison if they played that role out on the street, right? But we also
Yeah.
don't expect them to, like we expect them to behave like a UFC fighter in the ring because that's what people are paying to see. We don't expect them to, you know, hold hands or sing songs, right? With that, they're playing a different role. And so, but I think like understanding that what role are we playing is really, really critical. So yeah.
I love that. I mean, when we talk about authenticity, the things we see on social media, it might be like, be yourself in all the scenarios. And like, I agree with your take. It's like, there are times where you have to have more poise. There are times that you have to be a little more extroverted, or maybe there are times you need to be more introverted, authentic in the situation.
Yep.
And so I love that the UFC analogy, UFC fighter analogy, because it's so clear that they cannot be themselves fully. And you can see the ones that do get in trouble, or even like a rapper, or like we still like we have a persona that we hold, and it is still me. Like I'm still like I wear my CEO hat, I wear my coach hat, I wear my consulting hat, I wear my wife hat. Like, but the way that I show up for each of those does have nuance. And so I love that you say that, because I think sometimes it's like, well, if I have to be myself, like we can lose ourselves. I think the other extreme of it is then we lose ourselves thinking like, well, I have to be the consulting person and the all-knowing and the smartest person in the room. And that's not authentic if you actually don't know the answer.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly yes. Well, and I think this is the realization most children have when they see their parents, like when they see their parents out of a parent role, right? Like
Yeah.
they see their mom or their dad, like, drinking with their friends, or partying or something, and they go, mom, like, I didn't imagine this, right? Or,
Yep.
and because they have an image that, that's my mom, that's my dad, or that's my grandma, or whoever. Like they have a certain like role that they see that person as, and not realizing that, well, yeah, your parents are, which is sort of a maturity thing for most children when they realize, well, yeah, my parents are actually people. My parents actually, live a normal life, right? And they,
Yes.
they live, but I mean, it's the same thing when we see an executive that, and which I think social media has added another level of problems, because we do see, you know, an executive who goes out, and then they're dancing or they're having fun, and someone takes a video of it, and then it's blown out of proportion. You go, well, no, this is a human being that's going out and having fun. They're allowed to
Mhm.
have fun just like everybody else. And um and so, like, and I think that's sort of, what I was thinking about is even like the way we feed our minds on what social media is, and sort of like what we're bringing into our homes, or our brains, on even the like the criticism that we have of others, with very quick little reels or pictures, or things that someone else has made an assessment on, and we're just going, oh yeah, yeah, hold on here, let's stop. Do I really want to feed my brain with this, and trying to control that? Because I think what I'm starting to realize for myself is that also is leading to some of my exhaustion, is just this constant feed of negativity, or um, criticism of others. So
Absolutely. I heard this early in the days of the pandemic, but it was something along the lines of like more than 20 minutes a day of any type of social media starts to have a downward effect on the mindset. And it's so true that, and the news is right, one of those medias, the radio. And so if you can keep all of that to that minimum, like give it enough, I guess, to like get your juices flowing, or to, make sure you're checked into the world, but then also check out and remember that what you're seeing on your screen is not within the four walls of your home or your office. And that's the life that you can actually make the most impact in, and not necessarily the screen that you're seeing the hard things across the world. So we just have to be like mindful, because that does create a lot of exhaustion that is subtle, and it doesn't have to be as like energy draining as it can be if you watch like the news all day every day in the background of your work.
yes, that's right. Yeah, and I think that's the thing with just the exhaust. Well, it's sort of the, you know, like the complaining that used to happen at work, or weekends, or coffee shops, or whatever. Now we get it on our phones, or our computer screens, and again, the criticism of a lot of things are completely outside of our control, and it's
Mm,
sort of like, hey, what are we
so
going to do
true.
with this? What can I do with this? And then you go, hey, I'm just exhausted at the end of the day, or I'm thinking negative about the world. And and then of course there's behavior that can kind of drive from that, but just that weight that comes from a feeling of, the world is falling down around me, when really it's just, we're just being fed these messages, and we really need to feed ourselves quality thoughts.
Well, thinking about burnout, that second symptom of cynicism, right, can be really hard. I'm as you were sharing that, I'm thinking, how many times have you had a situation where like your whole day went what feels like wrong, and it's like, okay, even a simple one, you're at home and you're pouring up a bowl of cereal, and then the milk falls, and then you trip, or and then something breaks, and it feels like there's this like domino effect of all these bad things. But sometimes it's just like the lethargy, or like not the lethargy, but like almost like the weight of the thoughts that start to create the results of like, well, now today's a bad day because it's 8 o'clock and I've already had to clean up broken glass and there's milk everywhere and the house is going to smell, and it's only 8 o'clock. Maybe you had a bad moment in your day, You can choose that to be the narrative, or you could say today's just a bad day.
Yes.
And if we choose to say that every day may have, it could be good or bad, and maybe it has bad moments, we can reframe how we start to see every day, that not every moment of every day is bad.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. I like that reframing to just say there's some bad moments, and and then just kind of getting back at it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I like that.
good.
Awesome.
I like
Yeah. Awesome. So any final sort of suggestions that you have for people when they're kind of feeling burned out? And I know some of the listeners, some of them are kind of starting their consulting careers, other ones are deep in their consulting careers. So there's kind of a varying group, but any sort of suggestions that you have that kind of leave people with?
Yeah, it's gonna start low, but it's gonna end high. So stay with me.
Yes.
So I recently read a recent study on burnout that just came out that talked about a few things. One was burnout has plateaued. So whether that's good news or bad news, it's at about 39 to 40%, which is down from what it was from the pandemic, but plateauing means it's not going away. And almost 40% is still a lot of people.
Yeah.
So that being said, um, that's one of the big takeaways. The next big takeaway is even though we're plateauing, we're seeing a disparity between men and women. Women are burning out more than men. Okay, so that's another thing to think about. Maybe half of the audience here is maybe more burnt out than the other. But the third thing that contributes that really hits home for consulting is that one of the key factors of burnout is loneliness. So loneliness can play into the fact that maybe we're sitting in an office by ourselves and we're not really engaging, right? We don't have that third place anymore. And maybe we're scraping for it to be a Starbucks where we just talk to the barista and that's like our only human exchange. So if we're thinking, okay, these things are contributing to burnout, and as a consultant, because my life is so ungrounded, it's hard to have meaningful connection. We as consultants then need to go out of our way and in small gestures to make connection. Mm-hmm. Texting someone you haven't spoken to in a while, just saying, hey, how are you? Having reaching out to or meeting up for a coffee with a friend, having intentional Tuesday night game night with your family. We need to be more intentional about connection, because while it feels so good to like save our clients and serve them, to really go deeper is what's going to give us the meaning and that fulfillment, and will maybe just prevent a little more of that like razor edge of not burning out to burning out, or hopefully the opposite way of like engaging to not burn out.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. Well, it's crazy. Well, during the pandemic, I was at the grocery store and I literally was walking up and down the aisle, like talking to people, right? I would find like, see what was on a guy's hat and I'd start talking to him. And then I'd talk for 5 minutes and he'd walk away and I'd turn around and find someone else. And I left the store. I honestly caught myself and I was probably in that aisle for probably 20 minutes. I walked out, didn't buy, like I left my cart and walked out, sat in the car. I almost started crying. I'm not kidding you. I thought, Andy, you're the old man who's literally walking around the store talking to anybody. Like you got to get it together, right? Like, man, you went home and contacted some of my friends, because I'm still friends with a lot of guys I grew up with, but it really was like, Andy, like this is not good. Like you can't wander around a store, like, and just like, yes, I typically talk to everybody, but it was like, this is not good. Like you can't, like, this is like you're searching for anybody to speak to. Like
it's grasping, you're grasping
yeah.
for connection. And that's where like I appreciate that experience, because what it does is it just shines light on like those are the little things. If the only person that's like lighting you up is that moment in Starbucks, if you read Onward by Howard Schultz, like that's actually one of the things that they value the most. But as you, the human, you're like, there is so much more. And even if you don't have a big family, or even there's ways to engage in your community, volunteer. There's so many ways to find deeper, meaningful connections that can help you feel even better. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. And I know you competed in track, and my daughter competes in track, and that's what, like, I volunteer at the track club, and I always find like, we're there 3 nights a week and then meets, and I find, I'll kind of joke with other coaches. I'll say like, this is the time that all the problems of the world go away. Right. So, on an evening, it's 2.5 hours plus the drive. But on a track day, it's a full day, right? From 7 a.m. until like 6 p.m. Right. But it's really is the like, I don't look at my phone. I, I might use it to communicate with, my daughter or somebody else, but time stands still. And I find that break of just kind of leaving the world and giving back and then really being exhausted really is something that I know for me is mentally healthy, and just kind of that volunteering. And I thought even when she's done, I probably will continue to volunteer because I used to coach hockey and I really loved it.
Yeah.
Um, but that volunteering, I think, is something where we're connected to other people, we're giving to other people, which is something that I think human beings want to do. And I think really it's really a purpose to be here on the planet, isn't to just, buy a, expensive car and like take vacations. It's like we are supposed to give back to humankind and to individuals. So, but yeah.
No, I really appreciate that. I think there's so many things that you said that everyone can hear, that it goes beyond. And I think this is why we get stuck in being the hero, because that's our place. That's where we create the most meaning. But if we kind of step back and say, okay, I can bring that energy to so many places and give that type of service attitude of like, I'm going to improve everywhere I go and everything I touch. And all of a sudden it just feels like we're just amplifying like all of this good that we have to give. I like it.
Yes, I like that. Perfect. So that's probably a good place to end our conversation. But so, Lauren, where's a good place how can people reach you if they're interested in more information from you, or they just want to reach out?
Yeah, they can find me. I'm in all the places. I spend a lot of time in LinkedIn and Instagram. So you can find me LinkedIn, Lauren Baptiste. Instagram, I'm the Lauren Baptiste. But I also share some materials on my website, achellowellness.com. That's ACHELOA wellness, WELLNESS.com. And there's a ton of free resources there that you could take advantage of.
Oh, perfect. And we'll have that all that contact information in the show notes as well. So anybody who, if you're driving, don't try to drop this down. Yeah. So we'll have it in the show notes. So just find that, or search for Lauren Baptiste on LinkedIn or some of the other locations she talked about. So awesome. Well, thanks, Lauren. Thanks for talking with us today. And I think it's a subject that hits everybody, but consultants especially. It's something that's very common with consultants. So thanks for sharing your talk on burnout, and I appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you so much, Andy.